Welcome everybody, and we are thrilled to be here today, and I am particularly thrilled to be among a company which I've known for eons, and really good people and company as well. I think uh, um, um, Susan, we've known each other for definitely more than 20 years.
I thought you said eons.
It does seem like like eons, but really thrilled to be here with everybody. Um, Today, as we get started, I just wanted to thank the board and president of BirdLife Jamaica, Damani Calda, and the entire board for this vision and for discussing having this webinar focusing on one of the most iconic of Jamaican birds. One that I must say that I've had quite a bit of an obsession with myself. We are joined today by Adam Brown, senior biologist with the Environmental Protection in the Caribbean, EPIC. And EPIC is a Caribbean-based organization that has been around for about 20 years. And its mission is the dedication to protecting the Caribbean environment through research and community-based action. As I introduced how myself and Adam came together, I just wanted to do a little bit of storytelling at the same time, because Adam was gracious enough to come to Dominica, where I was doing research some years ago, and helping me with my fieldwork. And it was through that interaction that I actually discovered our shared interest. I was studying parrots, not petrels, another P, and I needed some assistance. And Adam flew to Dominique and actually came and worked for me for free for quite some time. And it was really very, very important that he did so, and in terms of the accomplishments that we made. So you can see myself and Adam here actually exiting one of the places that there could be petrels nesting, actually.
Wow, look at us.
I know, wow. Exactly. This was after a day of banding, and you can see actually our poles that we're using to set up our mist nets in the Central Forest Reserve, as it's called. And you can see Adam in this picture, and it's still dark. So we have hiked out into the central volcanic interior of Dominica and set up camp in a dry stream bed as we await dawn and birds coming into our nets. And the project that I was doing at the time, as I mentioned, was about parrots, and was making this connection between parrots and banana quits. And through the help, very generous help of Adam, we caught hundreds of birds. Just in terms of banana quits, we caught 800.
Like a new world record, I'm sure.
Oh my God, yes. Those banana quits were like coming out of every corner. So it was just incredible, really very important work. And also I was happy that we got it published. So, back to the Jamaican petrel. And the reality of it is that the Caribbean islands, there are so many native birds, endemic birds, unique birds that are languishing in the drawers of museums around the world, including right here in New York City, in the drawers of the American Museum of Natural History. This is actually the rare bird connection, and you can see this is the ivory-billed from Cuba, the Jamaican parroquet, again, not seen or heard of from the 1800s, the Jamaican petrel, in the center, the subject of today's talk, and the Cuban macaw, among other birds. Extinctions have really hit us hard in the Caribbean. Fortunately, I must say that there has been some hope And this is what we're talking about today. We're holding on to that, that hope that there's a real possibility that the Jamaican petrel is alive and well. And we want to explore that story today. As part of the intersection of Adam's lives and mine, in the 1990s, I also had looked for the Jamaican petrel in the Blue Mountains, along with Dr. Hurlitz Davis, among other researchers. And this picture is actually the front of the Jamaican newspaper. And what this is myself holding an Audubon shearwater. So petrels and shearwaters are very closely related. And as far as we know, this was the first time somebody in Jamaica had actually held a live member of this group of birds for over 100 years. So we're going to be exploring all of that today. I also wanted just to introduce to all of us, also on screen with us today, is Dr. Susan Otuokon, who is the Executive Director of the Jamaica Conservation and Development Trust. And this is the area that the petrel is known from, the Blue and Drunker Mountains National Park. And at the very end, we'll be hearing Dr. Otuokon giving us some closing remarks at the end. We'd also like to thank Timothy, who is on the call as well, Timothy Schaefer, who is a member of our department here at NYU, who has graciously stayed up to give us the technical support we need to host this webinar tonight. So without any further ado, I'd just like to hand over to Adam to say a little bit about his work and what he has been discovering about this very elusive group of birds, which people largely had given up on, but he has been showing incredible results throughout the region. So over to you, Adam.
Thanks, Leo, and thanks everybody for giving me the chance to talk about petrels. When my wife Natalia and I started EPIC in 2001, we wanted to come into Caribbean conservation and make a splash, and we probably got in over our heads, but our plan was to find the black-capped petrel on the island of Dominica. And we spent the winter of 2001 crawling all over Morne Diablotine and Morne Trapitan and Morne Verde, all over Dominica, looking into holes. And all we were finding was land crabs, not petrels. And sort of got our hopes a little dashed with, oh my gosh, this isn't easy to find species that have disappeared for a couple hundred years. And sort of put black-capped petrel work for our organization, EPIC, on the back burner, and did a number of other things, including banding songbirds, which is how Leo and I linked up, because Leo was doing a program in Dominica with the parrots there and with songbirds, and the interaction with some of the farmers there. So I came and helped, and Leo and I, both having had a passion for Caribbean petrel species, sort of would spend the night just talking about, oh, wouldn't it be awesome to find petrels? This would be so cool if we're in Dominica and we find petrel share. Oh, well, what about Jamaica? Like, how cool would that be if we could somehow see if the Jamaican petrel persisted? And so actually for me and for EPIC, that is what gave me the kick to be like, let's get EPIC back involved in Caribbean petrel work in the Caribbean. And serendipitously at that time, Jennifer Wheeler and Jim Getz and a number of other people that had a similar passion for Caribbean petrels at a Birds Caribbean meeting kind of launched the, hey, let's get back involved in black-capped petrel conservation. And they really pulled the program up from just a couple people looking for petrels in the Caribbean to creating a coalition of organizations that were interested, who has the expertise to do what. They co-authored the Conservation Action Plan, for the species, which is no small feat, but what it did is prioritize, like, well, where do we go and in what order do we take this big, massive effort on of finding out where petrels are, in this case, black-capped petrels, and what do we do first to figure out how to conserve the species. So that was 10 years ago. And we've come a long way with black-capped petrels. So we've focused our efforts on Hispaniola, which is kind of where the core population for black-capped petrels are, but we've worked both in the Dominican Republic and in Haiti. We work with a number of EPIC works with other organizations. We are by no means some lead group in this. Really, the black-capped petrel conservation effort is it's a perfect example of how collaboration within organizations and among different countries really can come together and empower each other to conserve a species. And so over the last 10 years, we found where all the colonies are in Hispaniola. We identified the human communities that are in them. We identified the interface between humans and black-capped petrels. We created priority programs of how to keep the black-capped petrel, which is listed as endangered or threatened by different organizations. And now we are for 10 years in and we are moving forward.
For many of our audience today, including NYU students who are joining us on this call, could you just summarize briefly for us how petrels are different from the other seabirds in the Caribbean, and why are seabirds threatened in general? What are the threats that they face?
Well, black-capped petrels and petrels in general are unique in that they are a seabird, but on Hispaniola, they nest at 6,000 feet. They nest up in pine forest. They nest where in the winter time, it's 0 degrees Celsius. It's freezing up there to do the work. Like when it's difficult to go from the coast where it's so warm to go up into the mountains to do the work. But this is a species that forages at sea. It nests up at 6,000 feet or maybe even higher. Their nests aren't in trees. They're actually burrows underground. In some cases, they're 3 meters underground. So they're very cryptic on their nesting area. And for doing research with them, it's really difficult to find their nests because the other thing that's interesting about them is they travel overland at night. So you can't go out in the middle of the day with your binoculars, your spotting scope, and look for them flying by. They wait till the sun is set, and then they'll fly up water drainages between the sea and the nesting areas and land and then scurry right into their nest. So you have to be very persistent on the nesting colony to look in their burrows to find their hole, their nesting burrows, or to find where they're active. We actually use marine radar, which is, people see it, almost all boats have them. It allows boats to see other boats in the water or groups of birds flying around. But we have used that technology to actually see petrels flying up the drainages and are able to then know if there are petrels there, and also to see where are those petrels going and then follow that target. And that technology has actually helped us locate new colonies where we followed those targets, we've located new nests, and it's also given us some hope on other islands that there might be petrel activity on those islands. Yeah.
So petrels are actually really interesting because, as you point out, they spend all their adult life at sea and then they come to these very specific islands to nest. And when they're not nesting, they could be pretty much anywhere. You know, they're coming all the way almost up to Canada, as we now know, when, you know, they're not on Haiti. Go ahead, Adam.
I was going to say, yeah, so you're getting into, so they spend actually a good majority of their life at sea. And even though up till now, most of our conservation work has been on land at their nesting areas, doing conservation at sea is a priority for us as well. And the group from Clemson, so Yvonne Saki and Pat Jodas have done satellite tracking with petrels with the help of Grupo Jaragua, using their study site and tracking birds and seeing where do these birds go when they leave Hispaniola. And it's really pretty amazing. They do travel, the large number of the population travels off of North Carolina. Some do go further north, but there's also birds that travel south and go off the coast of Colombia and Venezuela also. Yeah, conserving those at-sea areas is certainly a priority for the species.
So Adam, before we get to the research that you have done on Jamaica, what you have found and what comes next, could you share with us a little bit about the results from Dominica, where we met, because you've done a sizable amount of work there, and more importantly, Haiti, because you really have feet on the ground there, you have pictures, you have, you know, things which are, you know numbers, some numbers now. Share with us a little bit about how that has gone, how long it has taken you to get to this point, and what it tells us about where you're going on Jamaica.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you a little bit about Dominica first, and then a little more about the work on Hispaniola. So Dominica, the last it was black-capped petrels that nested on Dominica, and the last petrels seen there were in the 1850s-ish. And that disappearance of that we won't say disappearance because they still could persist there, but the lack of observations of the species coincided with the introduction of the mongoose to that island, as well as some overhunting of that island by some of the colonialists that came in. But over the last, say, 30 years, there's been these small inklings of like, oh, maybe the bird's still here. And it's been birds that have been found on the ground, which is like, well, why would there be black-capped petrels on the ground on this island if the nearest nesting area is 1,000 miles to the north? And this isn't on their foraging migratory path. So it really gave us some inspiration to, let's go back and let's figure out what's going on here. And at that time, I had gained some experience with radar. We found that we could identify what a black-capped petrel looks like on the radar. And for those that haven't seen it, because black-capped petrels have this interesting behavior of flying at night, where there's really not a lot of other in-flight of activity of larger things. There are moths, and there are some birds, there's some bats, but a petrel's a larger bird. And the other thing about black-capped petrels is they fly very fast. So they have to fly 50 kilometers an hour faster. And so using targets on the radar and speed, we're actually able to track, oh, that's a black-capped petrel, where are they going? And so in 2015, and then again, this past January in 2020, we visited Dominica, and we actually found black-capped petrels in pretty good numbers, a few hundred actually, in some of their, where they historically nested. Now, that was just us using radar, but we also, using night vision scope, thermal imaging scopes, we're actually able to see petrels flying over our head. Now, we didn't find them nesting, and there's been some effort to look for nests, but that's the hardest part of any of this conservation, is finding where they are. It's like, okay, we have some activity. We've verified, yes, it's a black-capped petrel. Now we need to go find them sitting on an egg somewhere, or find a chick. You know?
Sure. I can relate, Adam, because in the 90s when I was younger, I went up into the Blue and Jonko Mountains and all I came back was with doctor bills.
Yeah, scratches all over. Yeah,
So
right.
crazy rough. But
And
what,
so,
but what
sure.
you're saying though, Adam, is that we're on Dominica, you're saying that from the 1800s, where it's like nothing, this thing is gone, it's extinct, to where you're having solid evidence that there are hundreds of them there.
Yeah, you know, and it's not that difficult to believe if you've been to Dominica and you see how much of the island is really pretty pristine compared to many other islands in the Caribbean. There's a lot of the interior of the island is undeveloped, doesn't get traveled by people. And because of the nocturnal and quiet behavior of the petrel, they could easily come and go. And if their nesting area isn't near where people live, it's difficult to observe this species. So it's not that difficult to think, okay, you could have a few hundred pairs that are still, that persist in some very deep, you know, way in the middle of the place. And so it wasn't that difficult for me to believe in it. So the evidence of birds being found on the ground, including young of the year birds, and the radar data, and seeing these birds with thermal imaging cameras, like we're fairly convinced.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
And also,
as
Adam, they did actually find a disoriented black-capped petrel on a road on Dominica not so long ago as well.
Right. So, and that they've actually found a number of birds in this one same drainage in Dominica, and the petrels do fly up and down the watersheds, these drainages. It's like a map for them. It's a flyway, and a number of them have been found in the same area. And so we've put a lot of effort of focusing in that drainage and looking for birds up in the headwaters of that area. Yeah.
So Adam, you shared with us some slides, and we'd really like to see some of these pictures that you have and from the work from Haiti. But while I pull that up, we do have a student at NY who is asking, so you could answer this while I get the slides up.
Sure.
Why do they specifically return to land at night? Why night? You know, everything else is birds are active in the day unless you're an owl, but why are the petrels coming at night, if that is known?
I think that it has a lot to do with evading predators on the island, like being able to fly at night, because there are not a lot of avian predators at that time, gives them a chance to come and go these long distances. So for instance, in Hispaniola, they'll fly up to 50 kilometers over land. It can take them like over an hour to get somewhere. So they really need to do their best to stay away from peregrine falcons and red-tailed hawks and barn owls that might be flying in a crepuscular period of time. So it's probably for evading that.
All right, I have your slides up. I'm going to go to slide view. So let me just get this up.
So these are some images of the petrel, black-capped petrel at sea off North Carolina, and one of our study sites in Buchan-Chat in Haiti, which is in the border region of Haiti and the Dominican Republic.
Thank you, Adam.
Haïti chérie, ou c'est pas non?
That was lovely.
So part of our work, I'll talk a little bit about our work on Hispaniola. So we've worked there, some people like Jim Getz and Anderson Jean And the folks from Grupo Jaraga have worked there for over a decade with, like, as a part of their conservation work, focusing on black-capped petrels. And so they've been able to make relationships with some of the human communities that are near where petrel colonies are. And also, as part of their work, been able to identify some of the conservation threats to the species. And so with that, we've been able to focus our efforts then. So some of those priorities are, there are introduced predators. So there's mongoose and there's cats and rats, things of that nature. But you have a lot of human interface with petrel habitat on Hispaniola, and that really, what that looks like is just forest clearing in those areas. And because there is so little forest left, and black-capped petrels require this forested cover for their habitat, you have this direct conflict of needs. People that need a farm, feed their families, and you have a petrel that needs to nest here. And so we work in those communities to offset the pressure that people feel to clear those forests. So our collaborative group, we don't go in and tell people don't do this. We try to reduce the pressure in those communities of those people to need to then expand their farms in those areas. And in this village of Bukan Chat that you're seeing images of, part of that is working with farmers to incorporate more sustainable farming methods. It includes working with students who, probably some of the first students we've worked with, are now farming themselves and having to make land use choices. And so we actually overlap our programs with our farmers with the programs with the students so that they're hearing the same language all the time. We have a big pride campaign in the village. So we have a black-capped petrel festival in Bukan Chat where we celebrate the bird, but we also celebrate this relationship that we have between the conservation team and this village who's taking a risk to be willing to work with us. And then you saw a photo of the soccer team. So the black-capped petrel conservation team sponsors the soccer team in Bukan Chat. They're called the Diablo Teens, which is the Creole and Spanish names for black-capped petrel. And so that's them right there. And so when they play matches against other villages, they wear the black-capped petrel emblem on their shirt in support of the conservation effort together.
Perfect, Adam. So what are we seeing here in this image? It looks like that. What is it?
So part of our monitoring of nests is we have camera traps. Grupo Aragua does a really wonderful job doing this. We do a little bit, my Epic, along with our partners Joxé in Haiti, but we have camera traps on most of our petrel nests that we follow. And what it does is it allows us to not only see petrel activity, but also allows us to track what else is interacting in petrel areas. And so this is actually in La Visite National Park. And this is a cat, and he's sticking his head inside a black-capped petrel burrow. Luckily, he didn't get all the way inside, but he was investigating. He somehow sensed there was a petrel in this area, was investigating it. And so we captured him. And this type of images allows us to understand, well, how often are black-capped petrels under pressure by introduced predators? This is cats. Like I said, we see mongoose and rats, dogs. We even see people, that will come through. And in some of these areas, if a person finds a bird, they might collect that bird and eat it. We don't see it that often, but certainly can happen. This is a more modern issue, and this doesn't have to do with working with farmers and villages. This actually has to do with working with communication companies, and Hispaniola is no different than so many other places in the world where we are cell phone dependent. And because of that, we need a good signal. And to deal with that, communication companies put communication towers all over the place. Well, for a bird that travels at night over land, like the black-capped petrel, they're like moths to the flame to these towers. There's these big spotlights. Birds are attracted to those, and they'll strike those towers because they don't know that the tower's there. They'll be grounded because they maybe broke a wing or they're just stunned. But while they're on the ground, they're under great threat by these introduced predators that we talked about. And so one of the conservation programs we're doing is working with communication companies to reduce some of the factors with communication towers that we can change without limiting cell phone signals. But it's also working with local communities that live in these areas to know how to deal with a bird that's found on the ground. How do we safely collect this bird? Is this bird releasable? But as an instance, if there are somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 black-capped petrels nesting on Hispaniola, and in one night we found evidence of 9 birds that were on the ground at this tower.
Wow.
So that just shows you how large of a threat this is when birds have to fly past these towers on a nightly basis.
And some of the other threats that you described are just the habitat loss that is being...
Right, they're just human interface with petrel habitat. So in these areas, this young gentleman's collecting firewood for cooking. Such a huge percentage of the population of Haiti still cooks with charcoal or pine.
And what altitude is this at, Adam? How high?
This is probably around 5,000 feet, this right here.
Wow.
So it's the pine. There is still some broadleaf forest up in the areas where petrels nest, some areas. But in some areas, they're also nesting in pine. And so I believe this young gentleman has collected pine.
Caribbean pine, yes.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit, Adam, about the work that you have done on Jamaica. And so far, what have those findings looked like, and what are your next steps?
Well, actually, if I can ask you a question first, and then I'll answer that. But I'd like to hear about your first forays into, like, what was it for you with the Jamaican petrel? Like, tell me about that, because
Sure.
my work is built on your work.
Of course. Well, you know, here I was as a graduate student, along with, you know, amazing people like Hurlitz Davis, Susan Davis, among others, in the on the Mona campus in Kingston. And the idea that there was this bird or birds that has gone extinct. At the time, I was hanging out with Chandra Degia, who is now Dr. Degia as well. And she was looking actually for the Jamaican parroquet, another endemic bird that had disappeared from the mid-1800s. And based on the readings that I was looking at, I was like, you know, nah, this bird is there. You know, there's so much habitat up there in the Jonker Mountains, which are unexplored. And this bird is coming in during the height of rainy season in October, November, when everybody who is on the island of Jamaica, you're staying to the house, you're staying inside, especially if you're living in the mountains. As I said, you know, looking for the bird, I can completely relate to what you're saying. It was incredibly difficult. You know, rainy season, high altitudes, looking at sea. But I must say, especially for those of us on the call who are still in NGOs and still in academic institutions or interested in research, that this was an incredible, fulfilling period of my life. The amount of things that I learned about habitat, you know, as I said, you know, discovering the Audubon Shearwater, having the first sighting of a black-capped petrel at sea, as I was sharing with you the last time, off the coast of St. Thomas, out with the Jamaican Coast Guard, and also having good mentorship as well. a question I want to ask you before we get off this call as well, because we had somebody who was from the Atlantic Seabird Group who came to work with us, and incredibly fulfilling experience. And I'm really excited about your work, Adam, and hope that I can join you so that, you know, I can be there when you have that Jamaican Petrel in your hand.
Well, I'd say that you're certainly were the inspiration for Epic to go to Jamaica. You would email me like every year, like, hey, all this black cap petrel stuff's great, but don't forget about Jamaican petrel. Don't forget about Jamaican petrel. It's like, all right, fine. I'll go and do that. And you helped me create what our plan would be when we went to Jamaica. So it was, well, okay, so this species hasn't been seen here in 100 years. So where do we even start to go?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so you telling us, here's some of the history of where the Jamaican petrel used to nest, the few pieces of evidence that humans have of where they were. But there also, in 2009, there was an expedition to look for petrels off the coast of Jamaica, among other places. And that effort was based out of off the north coast. And I think their goal was to see if there was specific Jamaican petrel activity of birds flying to Jamaica. And it was in 2009, let's see, it was in November, December 2009. And I think they spent about 10 days offshore off that north coast, the north and the east coast. And they didn't see Jamaican petrels, but they saw black-cap petrels in that area. And they saw some behavior of black-cap petrels that was very curious. It was birds flying towards Jamaica at night as the sun was setting, flying what looked like towards some of the drainages coming down on the north coast of Jamaica. And while no petrels were ever seen during that particular effort in Jamaica, it was just some evidence of, okay, something's going on here. And so Epic took that evidence and we put our initial efforts into using our radar at these drainages, the main drainages, both on the north and on the south coast of Jamaica. Really wanted to focus on that north coast because of that offshore evidence. So we spent time on that main drainage that runs from, well, what is that? That would be, yeah, that is running from, I guess, the northwest to the southeast.
Right. Would that be the Port Antonio up to Moortown, the Rio Grande?
Yeah, but that Rio Grande area in there. Because it seemed like that is an enormous watershed and it funnels both the Blue Mountains and the John Crow Mountains. And so any petrel that's going to come down from a nesting area would be using those drainages. And we spent a number of nights in that area and didn't have any petrel activity. And it's interesting to actually have, I actually hadn't really worked anywhere doing petrel stuff where I saw zero, nothing. And people are like, oh, nothing, that's horrible. But to me, like, I like nothing. Like, I like zero because zero tells you, yes, nothing's going on here. It's move on. There's no activity in this area. Let's go somewhere else. And I remember talking to you on the phone on that trip, feeling kind of deflated. And you're like, well, have you been to Syncona? And I was like, well, what's the deal with Syncona? And you're like, well, and you told me the story of Syncona. And I think, if I remember correctly, the last known Jamaican petrel nest was found at Syncona when they were putting in the garden up there and they were digging the ground to plant these trees. They actually unearthed Jamaican petrel nests. So even though that was 100 years ago, is still like, well, okay, it's something, let's go on that. And so that's actually on the south coast. And this offshore work that had been done in 2009 hadn't actually looked at that, any offshore activity off the South Coast. So March 22nd, we brought the radar up there, and we had some petrel targets up there. And it was actually shocking to me. And I have it written down here. We had 6 targets, and all 6 targets were flying 65 kilometers an hour or faster, which is
that's crazy,
incredibly fast. These birds were flying. We saw the first one 30 minutes after sunset, and it was coming in from the sea going up towards Blue Mountain, up that large watershed. When you're looking from Syncona and you're looking east, you're looking over this huge watershed. I think there's an image one of these looking at that. And then 70 minutes after sunset, we had another bird, 90 minutes after sunset. But these are targets. So that's interesting distinction to remember in this case. We didn't see the birds with binoculars or scopes. We saw a target on our radar that fit all the attributes of what a petrel looks like in all these other areas. One of the more exciting ones was 165 minutes after sunset. It's almost 3 hours. It had been dark for 2.5 hours already. We had 2 birds come up and do some circling, or targets, do some circling behavior, and then continue flying out to sea. And that circling behavior often is, we attribute that to interest in the land below them, because there's no point in a petrel over land not just going from the sea to their nest, other than wanting to investigate an area for one reason or another. So that was interesting behavior. So yeah, March 22nd, 2016, we had 6 petrel-like targets on that south slope of the Blue Mountains.
So Adam, people have said that, the mongoose was the end of the Jamaican petrel, but there are mongoose on Haiti, on Hispaniola. What is your sense of the threats on Hispaniola, where we now know that there are hundreds, thousands, could be, of black-cap petrels, and the threats that are present on Jamaica?
It's really surprising, actually, and I would say that understanding the interaction between introduced predators and black-cap petrels is something we're just starting to do. Grupo Jaragua, along with Ivan Saki, are doing a program in the Dominican Republic right now where they're looking exactly at this. Like, how many predators are in these areas? What is the effect of those introduced predators on black-cap petrels? But I will say that all of the nest areas that we have, there are mongoose and rats. They're not always cats, but cats are in these areas at very high elevations that there's not always people around. I think that the very nature of how black-cap petrels nest, and Jamaica petrels too, gives them a little cover that other species might not have. But I would say that at our La Visite nest site in Haiti, every single one of the 45 nests that we monitor has had a cat or a mongoose invested.
Wow. Oh my God.
Every single one, and rats too. So that threat exists for petrels, and I think it's hard to understand what that population of black-cap petrels and Jamaican petrels was before mongoose and cats and colonial people came to the islands. But I think that this population of black-cap petrels is so minuscule compared to what was there historically. And so I'm not surprised that mongoose is given all the credit for reducing the Jamaican petrel population to whatever it is today.
So on the screen, what we have here is a shot of the Blue and Jonker Mountains National Park that Adam has been speaking about, where he has been looking. And I believe this is one of Dr. Atuakon's ranges in the Blue Mountains, along with your equipment. Am I correct, Adam?
Yeah, this is Jeremy.
Like Jeremy Schroeder.
Jeremy, exactly. That's Jeremy.
Well, first of all, JCDT, we could not have done this program, even though we're there such a short time, without them.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing was getting the radar into Jamaica. It took 3 months to get this equipment from St. Martin to Jamaica, which you'd think, oh, you just stick it on a plane, get it through customs, and you're good to go. It was so incredibly hard. But then once we're there, it was getting around, how do I get to that spot, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeremy would be like, I will get you there.
Mm-hmm.
And figure out, I've been there before, this is the road that we take to get there and get us there on time. And then be able to communicate, be able to talk to the human communities in those areas.
Mm-hmm.
So I explain to them what we're doing, why it's important. In Haiti, that's actually been one of the hardest things for us, is communicating to the human communities what we're doing and what, because it looks so foreign when you bring something like a marine radar to some of these places. They've never seen a computer or anything like that before. You have to really do a pretty good job. It's like you have to have very good on the ground partnerships. And so JCDT
Absolutely
was a great person for that for us.
You know, white foreigner coming in, like you must be like CIA or something.
You wouldn't even believe it.
What are you doing?
Really I can't even speak about some of the things we've had happen to us. So in Dominica, you know, that's been Machel Sultan, and in Haiti, you know, that's Anderson Jean. You know, we have these wonderful people that sort of hold our hands through this, because we want the information, but we don't always know the best way to navigate our way around. And so having good partners in all these places it's something we couldn't do these programs without. Yes.
I'm just looking at the questions. So you have actually answered quite a few of the questions that people have posed. There have been quite several questions. I just wanted to take one more question here, saying that considering the dramatic declines of the black-capped petrel population in Dominica and elsewhere due to the mongoose, what do you think are the defenses or any adaptations that these petrels might be exhibiting to allow them to survive in the Caribbean? I don't know if you know this, but you might have some thoughts.
I guess my thoughts are the evolution of petrels since the introduction of mongoose probably included them going to higher elevation to nest. We don't know that for certainty, but it probably was like, well, let's go where there's less. Let's go where there's less mongoose, less rats, less cats. If you're in these coastal zones, the number of introduced predators is so much higher. But that's not to say that those predators don't exist in these nest areas, but it's really the nesting behavior alone, the coming in at night, the nesting 3 meters underground. It makes it difficult to find them. Yeah.
One last question again from an NYU student who is asking, what do you think has been the most difficult part of your research on Caribbean petrels?
It's working with human communities. Like, I am a biologist, I'm an ornithologist. I know how to see a bird and go out and collect information on it. But what's hard is to be like, okay, well, now this is what's going on with the bird, and the issue is actually people. And you cannot go into communities and tell people you have to change the way you do things. You have to work with them to have them understand what is going on here, and let that community make the choice about how we want to go about conserving that bird. And so I started as a biologist, and now I am a humanitarian. Right. I'm an agroforester. I'm an economist. I'm all of those things. I think I've only ever put my hands on 3 black-capped petrels ever. And I've been studying them for 10 years.
So Adam, as we close, and you've put on a very big point, because I've had the opportunity to work with you in the field, and so many times people in the developing world, have horror stories about researchers who have come in and, have either stepped on local culture or just muddied the water where people don't want to work with foreign researchers anymore. I must say that my experience with you is that you have been one of the people who are more skilled in this regard and have been able to work well with locals. In closing, what do you think is the role of the foreign researcher working with local NGOs, working with local individuals, and how have you tried to ensure that you have done that to the best that you can? EPIC have done that.
A big part of EPIC's conservation strategy is to capacity build in the areas that we work. Mm-hmm. And in Haiti, that means working with Anderson Jean. And we've worked with Anderson since 2012, where Anderson was an assistant for us. We could tell him what to do, but he really couldn't take a conservation issue and plan it out over a long period of time. And so over the last 7 years, giving him a little bit of how to go about doing conservation, whether it's education, whether it's research, whether it's working with communities. And then you have a year like 2020 where COVID hits and right. EPIC can't bring any of its staff to Haiti. And oh my God, what do we do? Well, Anderson and his organization, JOXE, ran the black-capped petrel program in Haiti with no help from people from the United States.
Right. I believe this is Anderson standing in this corner of this picture.
Yeah, there's Anderson and Tinio and Renee, who are some of his assistants. They're Haitian assistants. And those three, among others, work in Bukanchat. This is one of the schools in Bukanchat in Haiti. And then Michelle Sultan in Dominica is another one. Michelle was an assistant with you and I, Leo, doing songbird work in 2010. And now Michel's one of the leading voices of conservation in Dominica. And he is driven and he's passionate and he's motivated and he's looking for ways to engage his conservation leadership in Dominica. And, EPIC can't take any credit for that, but working with Michel, I think we've allowed him to see that he's part of a bigger conservation effort in the region.
Take credit, Adam. You are a big part of that in terms of the training and the mentoring. We're almost out of time, but just wanted to thank you, Adam, and at the same time introduce Dr. Tuakan, who will be giving us some closing remarks and also the vote of thanks. Over to you, Susan. Susan, you're muted, by the way.
Thanks for reminding me of a fan going here. Might you be able to share your screen? Allow me to share my screen? If that's possible.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Try now and you should be able to.
Yeah, if only I can find. Right, so just to try to give people a little perspective about Jamaica, and this is really some of the so this photo here, to go back, is actually from Syncona looking south. So this is a part of the Blue and Jonquil Mountains National Park and now World Heritage Site since 2015. So I really just want to thank Leo for inviting me to share and probably put a little context onto what Adam shared, and I'm really happy for Adam's persistence and Leo's persistence to get Adam here in the first place, and hoping that he'll be back, because this is really a very special place, and this is some of the habitat in that area, which forms the habitat for so many endemic and threatened species, which is one of the reasons why we got our World Heritage Site status. It took us a long time. We had to remove some of the areas that we first had nominated. So this is Jamaica. So very bad map. Where's north? Yes, so north is up this way. So the places that Adam was showing, Moortown is probably somewhere about here. And this area between these two mountains is like a haven for such a wide variety of different species, many endemic, some of them threatened. And we've just been doing some Jamaican hootie or coney work in this area here. And interestingly, just as we finished that, then we found somebody with 2 conies caught in trap somewhere around here. And we've heard about that on this side. So I was actually interested, wondering if, because Adam's work was in the valley, and I'm wondering if there might not be places on these slopes of the John Crow Mountains. But trust me, John Crow Mountains is really very difficult area to work in. So, so I was mentioning this eastern edge here. Of course, it's not as high as the area over here that you were in Syncona. And some of where you were might have been within the World Heritage Site, which is outlined in red. And so our programs, you know, are wide ranging. And I think, as Adam was pointing out, the education and public outreach is so important, because community members are trying to eke out a living. And to be honest, a lot of times the various policies that are in existence, the bad roads, lack of infrastructure, really challenge these communities to make a living in a way that does not destroy the various ecosystems and habitats. But the problem really is that ultimately they are endangering their own lives and clearing forest and creating landslides that affect their own homes, clearing land with fire that affects their own farms. So we have a lot of these outreach programs, and I just really wanted to say thanks for the opportunity to share a little bit with you about the Blue and John Crow Mountains National Park and World Heritage Site, because one of the things we have been trying to do, because JCDT that manages the site is not a research institution. We're actually taking on a research project to do with plants, but it's very much applied research, and we'll be working closely with the University of the West Indies for you know, the academic help that we need. But there's so much research in every single different field, from straight biology and ecological research to socioeconomic to cultural. We do need researchers from, you know, anywhere that we can find them to work with us. And as Adam shared, we try to engage our park rangers, many of whom are from the local communities, as well as local community members, because we've done a lot of training, particularly of young people as tour guides. And so we do have people that we can recommend as field guides. So thanks for the opportunity, Leo, BirdLife, Jamaica, NYU for facilitating. And thanks so much, Adam. And we I'm going to keep positive. I'm glad. I didn't realize it was as many as 6 targets. I'll say targets and not birds. But I believe that the Jamaican petrel is out there. I think there must be space despite the mongooses, etc.
Absolutely.
People thought that the Jamaican hutia was extinct, the Jamaican iguana, and they're not. So why not the same for the Jamaican petrel? We just need more researchers out there. So thank you very much.
Hey, Leo, you're muted.
Sorry. Thank you. Thanks, Adam. Thank you so much, Dr. Tuakan, and thank you again, Adam, for joining us and sharing this such incredible work. And as I said, that we will be having your back and hopefully be able to join you in some of these expeditions. And perhaps we can even get some students, not only from NYU, but Jamaica, from other islands to come and join and benefit from all of the work that you've been doing. So thank you for your dedication. And again, thank you to the members of BirdLife Jamaica. And please remember to support the work of Birds Caribbean, the Jamaica Conservation and Development Trust, and BirdLife Jamaica. You can find their social media sites by simply Googling the names. We actually had put the Twitter handles for Birds Caribbean and BirdLife Jamaica in the chat. And we look forward for your support, and more so, we look forward to being able to share another webinar when Adam has some pictures of the Jamaican petrel to show us in the near future. So thank you, everybody. Have a great night. Thank you again, Timothy, for staying up to facilitate for us. And have a good night, everybody. And thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Leo.
Thank you. Thanks, Susan. Good to see you.